Now, the rest of the story.
And welcome back, everybody. So this video was filmed July 27th. This is the bearing failure I had on the cutter bar of the 735 Moco. I mean, today is not July 27th, but this is when the video was filmed. Today, for me, when I'm filming this or doing this voiceover, is the 9th of August already. You know, I've had this video footage sitting on my computer, and I'm just one of those things. I'm gonna use it. So I got footage of tearing it apart. It took me about 50 minutes. That's why I have this sped up like I do, to go through and get this all disassembled. My biggest concern was what I'm working on right now is these 4 bolts that hold everything together on down through this turtle shell. I've never had this off, and for those of you that aren't familiar with these machines, this is the end of the cutter bar that drives the whole unit. So there's the shaft that's coming down from the gearbox from up above, and it drives this end unit, and then it runs the whole way across. I've never had this apart, so you're gonna see me struggling to try to figure out how to actually get this whole assembly raised up, because I'm gonna call it the crop accelerator. I'm not sure what that tower is, but I go through and I take these top 4 bolts out, and what I'm was worried about before I started working on it, these top bolts on the other shells are exposed and they tend to get worn down, and it can be a bit of a challenge to get taken out. With this one being they're all recessed and hidden into that tower, the material isn't able to hit it and rub on it, and I was actually able to get all 4 of these out fairly simple. So on to what my biggest issue was, and that was that tower is held on by those 4 bolts. I picked that up, I'm able to move that, but then the shaft that comes down from up above, I'm not 100% certain how it was supposed to come apart. I'm pretty certain it's not how I took it apart, but I'm pretty certain that the shaft that comes down out of the gearbox, I'm supposed to be able to slide that up on the shaft, on the exposed shaft coming out of the gearbox, and that'll give me enough room where I can swing this top piece, the shaft piece, up out of the way, because I need to get underneath the turtle shell and get to the whole bearing assembly. And you know, when you're working on things that fail when you are already committed to a job, a task, and that task being I was trying to get my second cut grass cut down at the valley. Luckily enough, we do have two disc binds on the farm, so Ryan was able to run for the most part. But on this particular day, Ryan actually had 2 separate meetings that he was attending, and he wasn't able to run the entire time while I was gone. And he's got a little bit of a advantage over me. With this machine, I'm only taking about 11 foot, and that is, I got 11.7 feet wide, but that is if you are running with the cutter bar, the machine at full capacity 100% of the day. And anybody that runs these, you know, without GPS, this outside shell, this outside unit, is usually your underlap, as in it's not very common, especially on the kind of ground that we're running, that you are running with every single unit cutting hay, usually because there's a little bit of a space here where you're trying to make sure that you're not leaving skippers. So I'd rather leave a little versus try to run the full width of it, because then you end up running into the issue of you're leaving a bunch of hay standing. So what I'm having here is I'm trying to push with this bar here. I'm trying to push that shaft up, and number one, that shield here you're going to see me take off, that's directly above it. I was hoping because when you're rushed and everything, you're hoping that you can kind of skim by and not have to do this or that. And I finally decided that I had to pull these 2 bolts out that hold that shield in the way. And then it allows me to get in and actually be a little bit more aggressive with it. You're going to see me go through with the air hammer here. Yeah, that's right, the air hammer. And I was trying to rattle the knuckles up to encourage it to slide up on the shaft. And the problem with the shaft is it had a bunch of, it wasn't just rust, it was rust and residue, and I wasn't about to take the torch to that gearbox, the shaft, or a cutter bar, a machine that was full of grass residue. I was rushed, but I wasn't that desperate quite yet, so I wasn't willing to do that. So that's why I ended up resorting to the, see there, I'm trying to decide, is it going to slide up enough out of my way? If it would have slid up out of the way, I wouldn't have had to do what I did. And I know I'm kind of spoiling everything I'm doing in this video, but I ended up dropping out the 4 bolts that go up into the gearbox, and I kind of cheated in that regard, because then I just loosened those up and I was able to actually push the gearbox up that allowed the shaft enough space, enough area where I could swivel it up out of the way and get down to what I needed to work on. It's one of those tasks where it takes you, it seems like forever, and 50 minutes to an hour just on teardown, especially on a day when it was going to be a full day of cutting hay without any breakdowns. It seems like your whole life is ticking away. So 50 minutes to tear it down. It took me an hour. Luckily, locally, they did have the parts to get me up and running. And it took me like 15 minutes to go through and put it all back together. I can tell you that because I don't have any footage of putting it back together. But the unit, the bearing assembly underneath, is ultimately what did fail. I show you that at the end of the video here, where I can turn it like a half of a turn, maybe not even half of a turn, and it locks up either way. So it had a pretty good run. I've never had it off in the lifetime of us having this machine on the farm. Grandpa bought this in 2007 or 2008, I want to say, because I was still in high school, but I almost want to say I was a senior. And I do know I'm the one that I've put the most hours on this machine. I generally did do the most of the cutting towards the tail end of milking and Grandpa being around. I was typically the one that ran the disc spine. I enjoyed it. It's one of those mindless jobs you can do. The only thing that makes it a little disheartening is when you're seeing that other mower go through and it's cutting 13 feet versus 11 feet. Before we've ever ran 2 machines in the field like that, it never really bothered me. I can go around and around and around opening up my headlands. I can do like 6 or 7 passes. And it isn't until about the 7th or 8th pass before you start to feel like you're actually getting somewhere. And Ryan can start it on the field, and he's taking those extra feet. He obviously gets farther along than I do in a lot less time. It's a little disheartening. So you can see I'm starting to take the upper shield off. I actually replaced that here not that long ago. It wasn't until I started doing the hay down at the valley, the grass, that tall, thick, nasty stuff. I ended up going through and putting the shield back in. I didn't take it out before by any means. It's just the old one cracked and failed. And when we were just cutting alfalfa, it really wasn't a big deal because the alfalfa doesn't really get that tall to the point you got to worry about it catching on the shaft or anything coming down. With that reed canary grass, I knew from the get-go I had to go through and put that shield back in because I didn't need that shaft getting spun solid of all that material. And if you think it can't happen, it's actually happened with that shield being in. It was what, last year? That was kind of weird. But that's why I always make sure you got a pocket knife on you. I don't use the traditional pocket knives, just like the flip style. I actually use a box cutter style that you can get at the local general store. It's not the big bulky box cutter, but it's compact and it's not like you feel it in your pocket all day. But I've had infinitely more uses carrying the box cutter style over a regular pocket knife. It's a lot easier just to change out a exchangeable blade versus trying to constantly keep a pocket knife sharp. I mean, because honestly, keeping a pocket knife sharp for everything that we use it for is almost impossible. I mean, the big thing I use it for is when I'm baling, doing net wrap. A new blade in your box cutter or whatever blade will allow you to change net wrap rolls in no time flat. Catching up grass material, I mean that long stemmy stuff. Last year when Ryan wrapped the power takeoff in the 4640, same thing. Go through with that brand new blade on it, and I mean, a couple cuts and you're done, as opposed to sitting and using it like a hacksaw. So don't hate me for using the impact on this. I don't get super duper violent with it because I do know I don't want to destroy the knuckles or have anything reverberate back into the gearbox. But once I go through, I fight this for a little bit yet, but we got 6 minutes left. A lot of it is because I'm very confident. That's why I'm fighting this as much as I am, because I'm very confident it can slide up that shaft. But with it being so built up with the rust and the residue, not even residue, just crud, a torch probably would have done me best. I did use a fair amount of WD-40 on it, trying to just get it to break free. But when you're rushing, you can't really let a lot of that stuff actually sit and sink in and actually do its job. So I'm trying to spin this around, trying to get to the I wasn't just trying to push on one side of the upper shaft. I was spinning it around, so I was doing both sides, trying to just dog walk it up. In hindsight, it's probably a very, very good thing that I wasn't able to get it slid up, because for how much it was fighting me, I don't know if I would have been able to get it to slide back down quite so easy either. And like I said, the way I ultimately end up getting this taken apart, I was able to put it back together, everything, shields, every assembly, everything, in 15 minutes. So I got really lucky there. Or maybe that's just experience. That's not me bragging, but I've done pretty much I've done pretty much all the other shells on this unit, and the assembly pieces, it kind of hurts when you have to do them. It especially hurts now because before, it was 2 years ago the last time I did one of these. It was $400 and some and change. This one, I believe it was over 600, and that was, I kind of felt a little excessive, to be honest with you. But yeah, here we go. I'm dropping the bolts out of the bottom of the gearbox and actually make a little bit more of a progress. It's pretty sad. I make more progress in the last 4 minutes of this video than I did for the first 12 minutes. But it's one of those things where you're working on equipment like this where you gradually ramp up from gonna be somewhat careful and cautious, and then once the clock starts ticking away and you start realizing how much time you spent on it, you start throwing caution to the wind. And just like that gets pushed up out of the way. Pull that out. For reference, that's the original turtle shell on this mower. That one's never been replaced, which it goes back to what I said earlier in the video. When it's not being run the full width of the mower, that shell on this end, it really doesn't catch as much material as the rest of the unit, so it doesn't wear out as much as it does. But it is worn through. It does have a crack down the center of it, so we do have a spare one on the wall. I'm doing what I should have done from the get-go. I should have hit this with the air hose, but at least I remembered to do it before I broke open that bearing assembly. And you can actually see the dark spots. That's actually hydraulic oil from the seal and everything failing, which is kind of be expected because for the amount of smoke that spilled out of this thing when it finally decided to give, that was pretty impressive and not a great way. So farmer going here, I'm going to just take this, grab the cable tie to pull this up out of my way. You can see how that thing is, well, you can tell it definitely got warm. So I've had these where they've actually welded themselves together, and that's a little bit more scary than this one was. One of those more gut instinct things, again, is the fact that I was wondering if it was starting to... I noticed that it wasn't 100%, but when this machine has been around for over a decade, well over a decade, that's to be expected. And the farmer mechanic in me goes, I can probably at least get this through the rest of the year. Well, that came back to bite me in the butt, and here we are. Luckily enough for me, this shear hub, which is that square thing underneath this top washer here, is actually still good. It didn't shear or anything like that. So what I ended up doing, that is the part that the local dealer did not have, because I guess it's a different piece or a different part over, well, because it's driving the whole unit. It has more teeth in it to shear versus the rest of the hubs across the cutter bar. So I was able to use that, and it got me up and running versus having to go to Monroe, which Monroe would have been 3 hours. It's an hour and a half one way, just to get parts. And I was stubborn enough at this point that I would have had to go to Monroe. I would have gotten this back together, and I would have probably cut all night to get the hay made, because hindsight's 2020, and I haven't said this in anything else yet, but the fact that I went and made the second cut hay down here when I did was a very good thing, because the amount of rain we've had, it's already the 9th of August. I haven't had a decent day or a decent dry spell since this time right here in July where I made this, to get this stuff made again. So the stuff would have gotten that much farther along, and it would have pushed back my third cut. So second cut, being as light as it was, would have just transferred into potentially a third light cut, because I'm firmly in the belief second cut was done growing. And here you can see that's me trying to turn it. That is as far as I can turn that bearing. So that's clearly the problem. And when you tear this stuff apart, it's nice to know, it's just nice to be certain that you do understand that, yeah, that is obviously what failed, because it's kind of disheartening when you spend an hour to tear something apart and it's not the problem. Don't ask me how I know. I've been there many times over the years where you're working on one area or one part of the machine, and that isn't what was giving you issues. Happens a lot in the combine. I wonder how that is. So, thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We're working on the combine, by the way, so hopefully we can get some more videos doing that. So I'll talk to you guys later.